The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of Bronxnet or the program underwriters.
Bronxnet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk, now in its 17th year, one of the city's longest running TV talk shows. You can weigh in with questions or comments at 718-960-7241. Also, as always, you can email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, in 2009, urged on by Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., the New York City Council rejected a proposal to rehab the Kingsbridge Armory with a shopping mall. Since that time, along with the ongoing dialogues about living wages and Bronx unemployment, an Armory task force has been at work, charged by the Borough President, to come up with plans to develop the Armory in a way that benefits the surrounding Bronx communities and the Bronx as a whole. The task force released their proposals last month in this weighty document, and tonight we review them with a member of that task force who is also the president of the BOEDC, the Bronx Overall Economic Development Corporation. Good evening to Marlene Cintron. Welcome to Bronx Talk.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you. Why don't you just get everybody up to speed? What were the goals of the task force and the basics of this Kingsbridge Armory Task Force report that you released?
The primary goal of the task force was to bring together information that probably was not readily invited to come in and participate in the process. The community was up in arms. They felt that the original RFP did not include their needs and desires, and at the same time, we felt that there were many business opportunities out there that would probably better fit the Kingsbridge Armory. Mm-hmm. And as a result, this was the opportunity for Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. to bring together a myriad of individuals from very, very different walks of life: Democrats, Republicans, businessmen, community organizers, economic development people, to come together and take a fresh look at what could be done at the Kingsbridge Armory that would benefit the community, not injure the largest commercial corridor, which was Fordham Road, and at the same time be a boon to the Bronx.
Mm-hmm. And in short, and we're going to break a lot of these proposals and things down, what did you come up with?
Well, I thought it was a fascinating year. What we did was that we invited almost all of the major stakeholders in the Bronx, the educational institutions, the medical institutions, and the community, of course, and we asked them to come in and express their needs to us. We also made the city of New York know that, and actually some people outside of New York know that we were open to suggestions, and the end result was, much to our surprise, a myriad of very, very different ideas and proposals for the use of the Kingsbridge Armory.
Mm-hmm. And they were broken down, and I'll tell viewers, they were broken down into basically three models, as it were. One for a sports, wellness, and entertainment center, one for a sustainable food industry, and the third for a film studio concept. I guess the main critique that has come out, people have said, well, you know what, this wasn't a complete plan. In other words, you basically laid out sketches, and again, before the end of the show, we'll break down what the content of each of those are sketches of what might be there, three different opportunities. Many people said, you know what, you're basically just punting it back to the city because now you're asking the city to develop the plans for you when the task force had a year and a half would it have been better to come up with a complete plan and say, here's your blueprint, go at it?
Well, I think people don't realize that all we could do is propose and suggest. And we were together just a year. And what we wanted to do was to let the mayor and the city of New York know that there were other types of ideas available.
Other than the mall that they had suggested.
Other than the mall. I wasn't the economic development director. I had no idea I'd be at BOEDC when the project was voted down. So just as a mere Bronxite, I certainly celebrated, the city council voting it down, because I lived near the related Gateway plan and mall, and understood that that really was ramrodded down our throats. And while to a large extent it's been a good idea, fact of the matter is that here was the related again being given such a big plum that, to have the borough president stand up and say, we're not going to take this anymore on behalf of all Bronxites was extremely important. But understand that the Kingsbridge Armory doesn't belong to the borough of the Bronx. It's in the borough of the Bronx, but it is up to the mayor and the Economic Development Corporation and, of course, the city council to determine in the end what's going to happen there. And it's only the ball is only in his call. All we could do was suggest, and what we did was provide him a series of ways where he can go.
What do you think should happen now? Give me a process that should happen as well as a time frame, because frankly, critics said, you know what, if you reject this proposal, it'll be 10 years before the Armory is developed and ultimately turned into something that does benefit the Bronx, produce jobs or anything else. And now, by waiting for the city to come back and do its study, that's also not going to happen in a period of a couple of months.
I'm not sure if they need to make a study. I think what they need to do is react. I mean, they've gone through this process twice already. What we have done is add to the pot a whole series of people who have never been invited to participate in the process. And I just don't mean just the people in the community, but businesses from Long Island, a business from out in Pennsylvania, there's lots of opportunities that we've plopped down on the table, and it's really up to the mayor to say, you know what, there obviously is so much interest based upon this extremely heavy proposal, or this heavy report, that it indicates that if he puts out an RFP, and that's what he has to do, and invite, people to come back, he's going to get at least 3 strong proposals where he can make some decisions of. And some of them are coming with their own money. They're saying, we don't need a dime from the city or the state. We have our own money. We just want an opportunity to develop it with our own money. Not so bad.
Has the mayor's office or Seth Pinsky in the EDC responded yet?
Not to BOEDC.
Well, have they to the borough president?
Perhaps to the borough president.
Perhaps you're not aware of it.
That's one thing that we have not discussed.
Again, I guess the urgency for many people would be the time, and say, you know what, we have this proposal, we've been waiting now a year and a half since the other one was rejected.
Yes.
Wouldn't we want to move this forward at some point, because now I suggested, punted it back to the city.
Yes.
Who makes the city do anything at this point?
Well, this is good news, good news. Obviously, there is a large number of individuals that we have identified as being super interested in the Armory. But just as importantly, we are the last bastion of available land, of low market, low interest. Well, we're providing low interest rates right now. We have a lot of land to be developed. And, Brooklyn is running out of space. Manhattan certainly did a long time ago. Queens, I'm not sure what else they can put there. So the developers have been sitting on a lot of money, and they need to make money for their investors. And so, if the developers are interested and if the mayor really and truly wants to seize the opportunity, I think it's a wonderful time for it to come together.
It's interesting that you talk about the developers. One of the things that I thought was interesting, and again others have reacted to, is that a major conclusion out of this is that all of the plans, the 3 models that were developed, would need to be public-private partnerships. if there is development money, as you have just said, and certainly the borough president has said people want to invest in the Bronx, why do we need to go with our hands out back to government, which is of course strapped right now, and say, you know what, you've got to enter and put some money in, and if we do that, is that also going to delay the whole ultimate development of the Armory?
Well, my shortest response is we don't have to. Fact of the matter is that the Capstone project, did come out with these models, and they did that based upon what had been offered in previous RFPs. But what also this project or this plan also indicates is the number of individuals or developers who are willing to come in without any public money, are willing to do it privately. So I think this is a very holistic report in the sense that it can be either or. If the city wants to open up an RFP, they should open up an RFP that says, you guys who want some public money, give us your best shot. You guys who just want the building to develop it, for something.
Do you think, and again, because one of the conclusions that's in here is that really it needs to be a public-private. Do you think that there are still developers out there who are willing to do it without the support of the public domain?
Yes, absolutely.
A couple of quotes, then we're going to go to the telephone. One mega development expert, and there are many people certainly who disagreed with the borough president and what had gone on here, so we know what's out there, but one said even the best of these proposals would violate the borough president's own conditions. None of them have wall-to-wall living wage jobs, and the best proposal he's got is 420 jobs, of which only 270 are living wage. What's your response to that? Because jobs, of course, is maybe the center of focus of this entire process.
We have to first explain what living wage is, and the borough president's living wage mandate was for these projects that were asking for our money, your tax money, my tax money. If you don't want the public money to be a part of your development, then living wages are off the table. Fact of the matter is that if for those individuals who are coming in and developing their own project within the Kingsbridge Armory who do not need the public support, then by all means, that is not a mandate. But fact of the matter is that, the living wage bill is in the city council. We're looking to see how much support it has. We're looking to see who's behind it, but if we use the Gateway Mall as an example, it indicates that we were promised 1,000 jobs. It hasn't come anywhere near that. It's way under 500, and most of those are, I would say very easily, perhaps 3/4 of them are part-time jobs.
So after all this, the Bronx will only get 420 jobs out of that? That would seem to me, well, a way of not over-promising jobs, but it seems to me that that's barely sufficient given the opportunity at the Armory and certainly what the need is in the Bronx.
It really is dependent on what proposal, which may be in this report or may not be in this report, because fact of the matter is that having it in this report doesn't mean that one of these is the one that's going to be selected. It really still has to go through a whole RFP process. The person who's going to indicate what is going to come to the table, is of course the mayor and the Economic Development Corporation. And, it really depends on how the place is big enough for a number of these ideas and projects to come in together.
How much longer?
So that will determine
how much
how
longer
many
will
jobs.
it take to develop the Kingsbridge Armory so that it is producing jobs and becomes something?
That you will have to ask the mayor. We would like it to start, tomorrow. That's how quickly we would want the RFP to come out. But that really and truly is up to the mayor to say, okay, I'm willing to give it one more go around. He's got 2 more years.
He of course could throw it back to the borough president and say, well, I had a proposal and I had a deal on the table, but you rejected it. Now you want me to come back and
He had a proposal that did not meet the needs of the community. He had a proposal that would have been injurious to the longest commercial corridor in the city of New York, which is Fordham Road, and that was not fair. The small businesses on Fordham Road pay their rent. It's not subsidized. And yet, what was being offered at the Kingsbridge Armory, less than 10 blocks away, was subsidized rents, subsidized business. And that's not the American way.
Last comment from me, and then we'll go into the phones. Jack Kittle, who sat on the task force as a representative of the building and trade unions, was quoted as saying, "No one seemed willing to put any money into the project. We listened to one guy after another. No one wanted to bring their own resources to the table." That would seem to conflict with the notion that people want to develop in the Bronx and invest in the Kingsbridge Armory.
That's not necessarily true. The church that's in this proposal said, "I don't want a dime. I've got my money. If you give me the Armory, I will develop, what I need for, his church." He wanted to develop, some resources within the head house, studios, educational, food pantry, lots of other things. He asked for the site. There's another one in here. I'm not sure what the Velodrome was doing, what they were interested in doing, but certainly there's another one in this proposal where they're not looking for a dime either, and that's the hockey rinks, where they wanted to include a charter school, they wanted to include after-school programs, they wanted to include, the hockey rinks and make that 365 a year.
Do you have a favorite of the three?
I can't play favorites, but I will say that anyone that can meet the needs of the community and at the same time do a nice job to the Kingsbridge Armory, which deserves it, has got my vote.
I'm going to ask you that again. We're going to break it down, so don't go anywhere. The first one was Mark from Pelham Parkway. Now, Mark, I saw your name in here. You were one of those consulted. You've been on our show talking a lot about the need for a film and production studio in the Bronx.
Yes, I believe it. Hi, Gary. Hi, Marlene. Hi. I think the problem is when you look at the Daily News articles that they did about the Queens and the film business in New York, they cited the Queens studios. They're projecting $10 billion this year, thanks to the tax incentives of making movies in New York. But yet when I was at this hearing, what disturbed me was, and this is the partial thing, all the studios wanted the space because they don't have that type of space, even in Silver Cup, either in Kaufman. The only one that came to the plate pretty much that had a good idea and is community-oriented was Broadway Stages. The other two wanted us to rebuild it, the Bronx. They should rebuild it, and they'll run it. Then with their partnership in the union...
So if Broadway Stage is ultimately selected, that's okay for you, and that would fit what you have advocated?
I think if they negotiate better with them, I think, my personal opinion, they were the best player if they're going to do a production facility. Because the New York City, we lost 3 major motion pictures in the $150 to $200 million range this year alone.
Let me ask you this question. I was going to ask Ms. Sintra on the same question, but since you're here, aren't these jobs that could come along with a film studio union jobs, and wouldn't we then be in the similar process that we've been in on so many projects, that we have the promise of jobs, but they're going to people elsewhere because Bronx people are not in these unions?
Well, here, I'll give you the problem with that. You're right and you're wrong. See, the union professes our union is working 100% here in New York, so we got to get our brothers from other states to come in here and work. One of the things I mentioned to the union gentlemen is, why don't you send up a training program like plumbers and electricians do to train these people?
Does that training program happen at the Armory?
Well, I think it could. Why not? Why not make it part of the studio? You become community-oriented. But as you realize, as filmmaking is going more into technical and programming, there are hundreds of jobs that are non-union that pay $35, $40, $50 an hour when you make a major film. Keep in mind, not every studio...
Mark, we got to run. Thank you very much.
He's a good advocate.
He's been doing it on this show for years. Your thoughts about what you heard him talk about, that really when it came down to it, he said, I guess it was Broadway Stage was the only group that was interested.
Well, no. I mean, they all came, which was actually Steiner Studios was there, Broadway Stages was there, Astoria Kaufman also came on that day, as well as some of the smaller filmmakers. In fact, of the matter is that I learned a lot because I went after all of the studios and actually went down to Brooklyn. And it's interesting, every studio has their own flavor. But I thought that it was an exciting, what I loved about Broadway Stages is that they don't internalize their business. Steiner Studios is behind gates. Broadway Stages is in the community, and as a result, the local coffee shops, the Staples, the cleaners, the antique stores, everybody benefited from having them there. And as they continue to expand, so does the community also gets to benefit.
Our friend Bob from the Bronx News joins us. Hello, Bob. How are you?
Good evening, Gary. Good evening, Marlene. How are you?
Yes, go ahead.
I want to change it a little to the Muller Army
We
Reserve
can't hear
Center.
Bob down here, so I don't know what that's about.
Gary, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. I want to change it to the Muller Army Reserve Center in Wakefield, because that has to go before EDC, and Ms. Cintron is a member of EDC.
Got it. So your question is about this Army Reserve Center that's being debated up in Wakefield.
Right.
That
The
has to
mayor
move out
says-
before the armory happens.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do you have thoughts on moving that out, because obviously you can't start developing it while the armory is being used?
Actually, that piece of property is not within the considerations of this particular project and never has been.
Does it need to be?
No, it doesn't. It's separate and apart, and it's not part of the proposal. It never was part of the proposal. I know that there were considerations with respect to that piece of property for it to be a school, which would have been a fabulous thing in light of our need in the community, and perhaps it could be part of one of the educational incentives that's going into the armory. But fact of the matter is that piece of property was not ever considered as part of this proposal.
Something you mentioned that was in the newspapers and frankly was laughed at a little bit is this idea of a church. I mean, after all this time, we want to put a church, and what I think the sarcastic remark in one of the papers was, a really, really big church in the Kingsbridge Armory after all this time. Is that really appropriate for this large public space?
Well, I never say no to God. And hopefully nobody
I'm certainly not going to get in that realm, but we're negotiating a piece of development property.
But at the same time, when you open up a process, you accept everything that is suggested. You don't necessarily accept every proposal. You can really and truly accept one proposal, maybe two if they don't conflict. But certainly, this was one of the ones that, came in and said, look, fact of the matter is that there is economic development involved in churches, and churches do very, very well. Fact of the matter is that they also do something positive. And I don't want to use the word, I'm playing the devil's advocate here, but fact of the matter is that churches also do wonderful things for the community. Those people who are hungry and lost and addicted to drugs, find a sanctuary, find the kind of help that they need in churches. The other side of the coin is that mega churches tend to produce a lot of economic, if they get involved in creating CDs and music and the choir and films and, teaching people how to, speak, playing instruments, orchestra, there's a lot of ancillary things that go in it. And that place is big enough, not only if we were to think big, accommodate a church, but also use the head house for everything else that's needed.
People in CARA, which was the Kingsbridge Armory Redevelopment Alliance, and had worked on this extensively for, in essence, a generation. One of their main things was schools, and they said we need schools in the Armory. There's talk on these things for classrooms in some space, but no talk about schools. Is that still a possibility?
In one of the proposals, the one for the ice hockey rink, it includes a charter school. So fact of the matter is that,
Well, I don't know that that's what they were really talking about. They said, people say we need a middle school, a traditional public middle school to simply ease the burden from the surrounding areas. That is not a possibility at this point?
Well, it wasn't proposed. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a possibility.
Explain to me how a decision on any of these, whether it be the Athletic Multi-Sports Center, one of the not-for-profit and locally based organizations and community space, the Health Training Center, explain to me how a decision will be made on who gets it and what direction ultimately this will go.
Well, I think what normally happens is that, the mayor goes and asks EDC to put out an RFP, and then that gives everyone, whether they live in the city of New York or they're from from Georgia, where this church is from, or from Pennsylvania, where the velodrome is from, the opportunity to put their best foot forward, and actually submit a proposal, a concrete proposal with financial backing, with architectural plans, and indicate whether they're just interested in one piece of the armory, whether they're interested in developing the whole piece, and that's how that's done. And from there, they decide, they determine.
A quick question, and then we're just about done. Again, how long is this going to take? I mean, I know you've said, well, the mayor has to come back. What do you think they're going to do? And people want to know, they're tired of proposals. They certainly were saying, well, let's have the borough president come up with something. What's the distance of time between now and the time before a shovel is put in the ground and we actually get something at the armory?
I really don't know, but fact of the matter is that there are many, many, many developers who are very interested in developing the Kingsbridge Armory. Some of them are friends of the mayor, and there's a huge need in the community. So fact of the matter is that it can happen and should happen as quickly as possible. We have a need.
I wanted to break some news on the show. You told me beforehand the space, the old Stella Doro space, there's an HBO documentary on what happened there.
Yes.
But you can give us some news on what definitively is now going to happen in that space.
Well, it's during a quiet period, but I understand I can affirm that there is an interest that has been indicated. They're in contract, and Stella Doro is about to be sold off. I think there's a closing in the next 10 days or so.
Can we say the name of the largest store in there?
Well, the developer.
I'm ready to say it.
Yeah, and it's online, interestingly enough.
All right.
Somebody saw the contract online.
All right.
And so the developer has invited BJ's to be a part of the Stella Doro area.
And that will be on 238th and Broadway.
Yes.
This is your first visit to our show. Clearly you have to come back because I got a whole list of questions and we still have more of the report to investigate. Marlene Cintron, thank you for your time this evening.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Next Monday night, a little bit of a different show. We'll talk about Indian Point and all the different angles that go into what is going on up there, and also we'll talk about the nature of energy in New York State. So Bronx Talk live every Monday night at 9. Special thanks, of course, to Jane Filoro. Director Sean stepped in. Dina is here working with us, our cast of thousands who are around us. And to you too, good night.
Magical evening celebrating the best of the Bronx. It's the 2011 Bronx Ball, only on Bronxnet. See hometown heroes inducted onto the prestigious Bronx Walk of Fame, including Grammy and Oscar winner Irene Cara, TMZ super producer Charles Latibaudiere, Hollywood starlet Joy Bryant, and the incomparable Chaz Palminteri. It's the 2011 Bronx Ball, premiering Wednesday, July 20th at 8 p.m., only on Bronxnet. It's a magical evening celebrating the best of the Bronx. It's the 2011 Bronx Ball, only on Bronxnet. See hometown heroes inducted onto the prestigious Bronx Walk of Fame, including Grammy and Oscar winner Irene Cara, TMZ super producer Charles Latibaudiere, Hollywood starlet Joy Bryant, and the incomparable Chaz Palminteri. It's the 2011 Bronx Ball, premiering Wednesday, July 20th at 8 p.m., only on Bronxnet. It's a magical evening celebrating the best of the Bronx. It's the 2011 Bronx Ball, only on Bronxnet. See hometown heroes inducted onto the prestigious Bronx Walk of Fame, including Grammy and